The story starts with two vampires, William and Arthur, confronting a rogue vampire, Matteo, and telling him that human blood is off limits if he wishes to stay in a human society. However, the red-eyed vampire can't care less about these stupid rules and decides to fight Arthur head-on. However, he's no match for the formidable Arthur and manages to escape his clutches with a hair's breadth. The rogue vampire ends up losing his coin on the ground in the battle as he runs for his life. That coin is found by a young girl named Irene the next day, who's a financially struggling student, and she keeps it, taking it to be an antique and valuable thing. When she arrives at her college, she and her friend Austin are bullied by the school's richest trio, Gabriel, Louis, and Amelia. The group of rich brats makes fun of their poor appearances, leaving Austin fuming as they walk away. After they leave, Irene tries to pacify the angry Austin, but she accidentally drops the vampire coin and chases it on the parking road, almost getting crushed by Arthur's speeding bike as she sits on the road after finally picking it up. Arthur manages to evade the accident with the last-minute divert and scolds her to choose another way to die, while the girl embarrassedly apologizes to him. Later, she places the coin in a coin jar inside her locker before gossiping about the new joinee in their college with Austin and Fiona. The young man is rumored to be rich and handsome, and this news spreads around the campus like a wildfire, catching Amelia's attention. The snobbish girl finds the young man to be totally up to her standards and declares to woo him immediately. Irene fails to realize the reason for their classroom being so packed with the students during the lecture until Fiona reminds her that the girls are there to ogle at the newcomer. They soon get busy with the professor, who hands over their marked assignments, and Irene gets an earful for handing in the pages filled with food stains. She has a brief interaction with Arthur and finds him extremely rude as the young man happens to catch her assignment overthrown by the professor, but decides to drop it to the ground nonetheless. His appearance causes almost the entire class of girls to swoon over him, except Irene, who looks unfazed by it. She watches Louis and Amelia trying to befriend Arthur, but he ignores them, choosing to sit in the back and instantly drawing the girls' attention like a magnet. On the other hand, Arthur senses the presence of the evil vampire's coin around, which is lying and glowing in Irene's locker, and discerns that something bad is about to happen. His distracted condition gets him a scolding from the professor, who calms down only after the young man correctly answers his questions related to history. After class, Irene collides into him again while she's on her way to the canteen to use a discount coupon that Fiona gave her earlier. The coupon is supposed to expire in the evening, so she's in a hurry to use it. She apologizes to him for the collision, but Arthur's cold demeanor despite her apology makes her dislike him. More so when she realizes that he might have taken her coupon away, as it's not in her hand anymore. The girl chases him like crazy and finally manages to take her coupon away, which is stuck under the man's shoes and has gotten damaged. Arthur finds her sadness over a $5 coupon silly, but she looks ready to fight to prove the worth of money to him. However, her emotional monologue about working hard to earn money only earns her an exasperated sigh before he rides his bike away. In the evening, Irene and Austin learn that the bakery they work a part-time job at might get shut off due to lack of business and funds. They have worked there long enough to consider the owner their family and request for him to cut their salary in half instead of closing the shop. The owner looks touched at their show of sympathy and promises to think over it. He later sends both of them to deliver some orders. The address that Irene is assigned turns out to be Arthur's home, where a pool party is being held while he's away in his room with all the "I don't care about girls" attitude. His fellow vampire, William, tries to talk him into having some fun and not be so serious all the time. He argues that given their long lives, a little bit of attraction is important to keep them interested and going, but Arthur doesn't look convinced. Later, Irene arrives there and asks for a girl's permission to use the bathroom after delivering the goods. She gives her directions to the nearest bathroom. However, that bathroom is occupied by William, who's busy with a girl, so she heads to the bathroom on the first floor on his instructions. There she meets Arthur, who misunderstands her for someone hired by William and sent to entertain him. So he makes a move on her, forcing her into submission, but Irene succeeds in pushing him away and escapes. Unfortunately, she missteps on the stairs in urgency, causing her to slip and almost fall if not for Arthur's timely rescue. Poor boy ends up getting slapped in return for being disgusting and watches her leave in astonishment. All this while, William seems to be watching and enjoying their interaction and discloses to the stiff boy later that she wasn't an entertainer hired by him. On the other hand, Irene narrates everything to Fiona upon reaching home, all the while cursing him nonstop for being such an ill-mannered person until her mother calls to check on her. Few days later, William tells Arthur that he's hosting a party for his birthday, but the younger vampire doesn't look too keen on being a part of it. So they make a bet to let a sprint through the jungle decide on who gets to be the boss of his birthday plans. The pair runs through the jungle at an astonishing speed, causing a tree to fly across the road and hit Irene on her way to deliver an order. The impact of a whole tree not only damages her bike, but also leaves injuries on her body, leaving her baffled at the sudden attack. She's soon approached by Arthur, who helps her up while apologizing for his misbehave the other day, and explains that he mistook her for someone else. However, she looks the least bothered by it as she insists on delivering the order on time despite her injuries. Arthur finds her insane, but the girl talks about how her bakery's reputation will be affected if she doesn't do it, so he offers to drive her there in his car, and even delivers the order on her behalf. He then tells her to go to the hospital, but Irene tries to evade it given her limited expenses. Seeing this, Arthur uses his powers to turn her unconscious before bringing her to the hospital. His other special power is also revealed, that is, being able to hear people's thoughts on will. When Irene wakes up in the hospital bed, she finds Arthur waiting for her by the bedside. However, she's more freaked out by the fact that he brought her to an expensive hospital and how hard it's going to be for her to pay the bills. Arthur assures her that he's already cleared the hospital dues, leaving her perplexed as to why he'd do that for her. Back at Arthur's home, William urges him to go back to his friend at the hospital, but he tells him that she's fine now. It's revealed that William wishes to set him up with a nice girl to ignite the passion to live in the boy, because it so happens that Arthur has made him sign a contract that he'll freeze him away and put him in a coffin after his upcoming 224th birthday, as he doesn't wish to live any longer. Meanwhile, Arthur looks occupied by his past memories, the dreadful night to be specific when he became a vampire. He had a lover, Maria, and they both tried to escape the vampire attack on their village. Unfortunately, Maria was caught and killed by the vampire despite his efforts to save her. Arthur himself was left fatally injured that night. He still misses her to the date and holds her ring close to his heart as her last memory. On the other hand, the rogue vampire that initially had a face-off with Arthur intrudes the hospital while sniffing a trail of blood left behind by an accident patient. It just so happens that Irene tries to use the elevator to go somewhere when suddenly the whole building gets shrouded by darkness, and Arthur hears her scream from miles apart. Well, he can do that since he's a vampire and has some special abilities such as tracking someone with their ultra-sharp senses. He navigates the girl to be sitting in a corner of the elevator, smeared in blood and trying to hold her fear, while another flash shows the rogue vampire feasting on someone's blood. He immediately goes to the hospital, using his abilities to track the girl, and finds her sitting shocked still in an open elevator. Irene fails to utter a single word and goes unconscious in his arms. Arthur brings her to the hospital room, and after finally freshening up, she reveals that she was accompanied by a pregnant woman in the elevator who had to give birth right there and then due to being stuck in the place thanks to the electricity outage. After leaving her room, William reveals to him that Matteo had been there and sucked a patient dry before escaping away. However, it's hard to catch on his trail since the vampire has long left the hospital premises. On the other hand, Austin advises Irene to stay away from Arthur, referring to his suspicious behavior as he doesn't mind other girls but seems to be especially kind to her. But Fiona thinks that it might be because she's the only girl in the college who doesn't swoon over him, and Arthur is trying to impress her. However, she too agrees that his reason would be to leave her heartbroken once she starts admiring him. Scared by her friend's elaborate drawings, Irene vows to stay away from the man. It doesn't help that she finds a brand new bike outside her home the next day, which is labeled as an apology. She figures that it must be from Arthur, and tries to return it to him with the promise of gradually paying back the hospital dues as well. But Arthur refuses to accept it as it turns out that the scooty was sent by William. Irene doesn't believe him because she doesn't have anyone else who can get such an expensive gift for her, so she forcefully tries to shove the keys in his shirt pocket. The push and pull between the stubborn pair eventually causes Arthur to push her away and leave, but Irene accidentally falls into the swimming pool by her side. She doesn't know how to swim, and Arthur ends up having to rescue her given her shouts for help that remind him of his lover's screams for help as he helplessly watched her getting killed. However, the long exposure to water seems to have played with her system as she remains unconscious, despite Arthur's efforts to pump water out of her body. As a last resort, he gets to perform the artificial respiration, but she misunderstands his intentions upon waking up and slaps him for trying to take advantage of her. Soon realizing her mistake, she apologizes to him again before rushing off to the class. As unlucky as it may sound, her assignment got drenched and destarthered by the pool water, and it doesn't help that it's the same professor's class who scolded her for handing in the assignment filled with food stains. This new stunt earns her another scolding, and a warning that she'll fail to graduate if this all keeps going on. Arthur hears her desperate thoughts to graduate as soon as possible and decides to help her out by asking the teacher to pair him up with the girl while everyone else is pining to partner with him. He explains his reason to help her out since she's weak in studies, so the professor agrees to his request against her protest. Later, Arthur meets William in a bar, and their shared history is revealed. Turns out that Arthur was the only survivor of his whole village slaughtered by Theodore, the rogue vampire, and that's because William, another vampire, had found and turned him into a vampire as well. Arthur blamed him for making him a beast as he didn't wish to kill others, but William told him that he could use those powers to protect others well. Ever since, they have been living together as cousins and living off the animal blood while also trying to remind other vampires not to go astray. Next day, William goes to meet Irene and introduces himself as Arthur's cousin, whom she saw at the party. The two hit it off really well thanks to William's friendly personality, and he even tricks her into buying him something to eat by pretending that he left his wallet at home. Not just that, he also makes up a sob story on Arthur's part, saying he lost his parents in a car accident at the age of 5, and the trauma made him appear a bit rude. Irene, of course, believes him and feels bad for the younger vampire. William keeps talking and buying street food with his own money after telling her that he just tricked her into buying something for him. Eventually, he drags the poor girl home with him with the excuse that he's unable to carry so much stuff alone. All along, his plan is to keep her around Arthur, and he keeps making up situations where Arthur has to protect the girl. Arthur brings her away from William to another room, and they spend hours studying and relaxing around each other. Irene also teaches him the game of rock, paper, and scissors, which he finds quite bizarre at first. Later, Irene uses his kitchen to cook a meal on his suggestion, which they both enjoy, reminding Arthur of the old times when Maria used to cook for him. At night, he drops her off and catches Austin waiting for her on the balcony of her home. Austin fails to come up with any negative remarks when she praises Arthur's genius and states how he isn't half as bad as they used to consider him. But he looks concerned with her growing attachment with Arthur. Next day, Arthur returns Irene her phone in college and mentions that she forgot it at his home yesterday. His statement shocks everyone around them as they're surrounded by their classmates. Not to mention, William also comes there and invites Irene for Arthur's birthday party, referring to her as Arthur's girlfriend, saying he wishes to introduce his cousin's girlfriend to everyone. Irene tries to clear the air that she isn't Arthur's girlfriend, but William brushes it away, calling it her shyness, and even mentions how he's aware that the two have already kissed. Their conversation is overheard by everyone, including the famous trio's member Louis. Irene instantly becomes the target of every girl around the college. The bullying reaches the point where they'd openly aim a basketball at her face, and she barely escapes it when Austin pushes her to take the brunt of it. He urges her to talk to Arthur about it and tell him to clear all the rumors, but she insists on taking care of it by herself. She's again bullied during her lunch break and confronts everyone to stop bothering her when she's not related to Arthur. But no one believes that she only went to his home for the sake of her assignment. They even go as far as to distribute some photoshopped vulgar posters with her name, leaving her utterly shocked and disheartened. At some point, Arthur also reaches the cafeteria and happens to watch all the commotion. Only Gabriel from the famous trio feels bad for her. She tries her best to hold her tears back, urging herself not to cry in front of strangers. Hearing her thoughts, Arthur finally steps in, telling everyone to confront him if they have a problem with him choosing to team up with her since she didn't choose it. He also declares that all of her problems are his henceforth, and whoever opposes the girl is his enemy, before holding her hand and walking out of there while everyone else is left utterly baffled by his statement. Once out of there, Irene scolds him for his rash actions and how he's only adding trouble for her and confirming others' suspicions. To this, he declares to stay away from her matters and leaves. He forgot his announcement from a few moments ago. Irene fails to understand his motive for going out of the way to help her and decides to stay away from him on Austin's suggestion. Later, she discovers that the date of her exams and judo competition is clashing, so she has to request the student council to push the date of competition ahead. However, the student counselors are none other than people in Amelia's group. Meanwhile, Amelia and Louis get into an argument with Gabriel over Irene because he disapproves of their efforts to defame the girl. They leave him behind in the restaurant, saying he doesn't deserve to be their friend. When Gabriel finally steps out of the restaurant, he gets into a fight with 2 boys, and his friends keep watching from the side until Irene passes by the place and uses her judo skills to fight them off. However, Gabriel leaves without acknowledging her help. Arthur, who also witnessed the scene unfold, expresses his confusion over her helping her enemy, but she brightly exclaims that she doesn't have time to water and nurture enmity. She only wishes peace on her path to graduation and achieving championship in judo. Amelia and Louis refuse to help her with the dates regarding her competition. They also pass some insulting remarks on Irene and Austin, following which Irene and her friends start protesting against the student council. They also get some help from a reporter friend of Austin, but the man turns out to be a pervert and captures Irene's subjective photos. However, Arthur happens to hear his thoughts and saves her high, exposing his actions to Irene's team. Arthur suggests to Irene and her friends that they stop protesting and look for some alternative solution, but they refuse to listen to him. As Arthur expected, no one helped the group even after several days passed. Instead, Irene's tent gets damaged from several places, causing the intense weather and rain to directly affect her. When Arthur goes to check on her during rain at night, he finds her unconscious and immediately brings her to the hospital. As always, her first concern upon waking up is hospital dues, and she tries to leave as soon as possible. Arthur has to force her back into the bed, saying he has already taken care of the dues. They're soon approached by Irene's mother, who mistakes him to be her daughter's boyfriend, but Irene makes sure to explain that they don't have any such relationship between them. On the other hand, Arthur talks to Amelia about striking a deal regarding Irene's competition, and she agrees on a condition not revealed. Irene is informed by her friends and Gabriel that the student council has finally sent a request to postpone the competition on her behalf and has also allotted a judo club to her for practice. Not just that, Gabriel also joins her judo team. While the place allotted for the club looks remote and run down, and Irene has to put a lot of effort in cleaning it along with her friends, she still looks happy about it. While she's busy cleaning the club with her friends, Arthur and William trace Mateo's location to be in the same area and find a dead body near her place. They fail to catch the rogue vampire, but Arthur intercepts a fox spirit inches away from approaching Irene from the back. The fox spirit, Evie, expresses that she doesn't intend on hurting anyone and that she's looking for a vampire named William. William's name surprises Arthur, making her realize that he may know him. She begs him to reveal the older vampire's whereabouts to her, citing her love and 2 centuries of search for William. Arthur doesn't know if she can be trusted, so he tells her to look for him in Alaska, saying that's where he's for now. After going home, he teases William about Evie, who looks horrified at the idea of her finding out his real residence. Arthur seems to enjoy his plight as William reveals his first encounter with the fox spirit, where he saved her from man-made traps in the jungle. He also bandaged her injured foot, and as luck would have it, they even shared a kiss. However, it was at that moment that he sensed the smell of a fox spirit on her, which he found quite disgusting, so he ran away from there. But Evie took that kiss so seriously that she's still chasing after him after 200 years. Hearing this, Arthur suggests that he needs to make things clear with Evie and end her pining, but William looks skeptical as his reason looks hard to be believed. Irene and Arthur finally complete their group assignment, and she cooks him a few meals during this time frame. After completing the task, he also offers her some frozen food and ingredients that he thinks are going to expire soon so she can use them. Although happy to have completed the work, they both seem to miss each other's company later. This time, Irene earns her professor's praise for handing in an outstanding assignment and offers to treat Arthur to a meal to thank him for his help. Instead of choosing a restaurant, Arthur prefers her homemade fried rice, and they decide to meet at his home for dinner where she'd cook him the meal. However, when she's about to leave work and head to his home, Austin loses his keychain that's quite important to him. Notwithstanding her friend's worried look, she starts helping him to look for it, but as time passes by, they fail to find it anywhere. On the other hand, Arthur keeps waiting for her with all the ingredients prepared beforehand. It's revealed that the day happens to be his birthday, and he wished to celebrate it with Irene. Irene finally finds the keychain in the trash bin, but thinks it's too late to go to Arthur's home. At first, she calls William to inform Arthur on her behalf that she won't be able to make it, but when he reveals that the boy was looking forward to celebrating his birthday with her, she immediately goes to him. Arthur looks upset at her unprofessional behavior, but she manages to drag him to a tower's rooftop where she used to celebrate her birthdays with the family. Arthur looks quite surprised to learn that she's aware of his birthday and gets impressed with her blow the candle trick. Irene puts a cupcake in front of him, asking him to blow the non-existent candle in 3 seconds, and as soon as he does blow, the building in front of them goes dark, working perfectly as the cake's candle, leaving him impressed. They share the cake while chit-chatting, and Irene ends up sleeping on his shoulder for the rest of the night as they sit there. She looks embarrassed about it upon waking up the next morning, though. Next day, she brings him to an amusement park where they try different rides, and although this all appears childish to Arthur, he thanks for her efforts while enjoying her silly thought process. Later, Irene finds an unconscious Evie on her way back to home and allows her a few days' stay upon learning that she's come from a faraway land to look for her boyfriend. Next day, she keeps missing Arthur during the class and goes to his home to check on him. William reveals that he has gone to attend a charity function arranged by their college and suggests that Irene also go there. He also goes as far as arranging the city's top designer and makeup artist for her to look presentable for the event. Finally, he drops her off after giving her one of his rings to complement the look. Inside the hall, Irene's friends and classmates look shocked to find her in this new avatar and praise her for it. Soon, a dance performance is announced and they excitedly near the stage to watch Amelia's dance performance. Irene, on the other hand, is shocked to see her dance with Arthur and leaves the hall without waiting for the performance to end. It's revealed that Amelia made him promise the event's first dance with her in exchange of requesting a reschedule for Irene's judo competition. When Arthur catches her leaving the hall, he immediately distances himself from Amelia and follows the girl out. However, instead of stopping her and explaining things, he silently walks behind her all the while listening to her thoughts until she reaches home. And even after that, he realizes that the girl has started to like him, and her pure emotions mess him up. He scolds William for his intervention and causing Irene to be hurt before announcing that he's soon going to cut ties with her. However, William tells him to move on from his past and accept a new chance at love, but he fails to convince the younger vampire, who angrily stomps away. On the other hand, Evie finds William's ring and the stuff that Irene packed up to return to him and immediately recognizes it. She begs her for William's address and instantly goes there, finding him about to leave in his car. William brings her to a club and makes up a fake love story in response to her love confession. He pretends to already have someone he loves and says that he converted that girl to a vampire so they can live together forever. Although hurt, Evie looks touched by his loyalty, calling the girl lucky who owns his heart. Irene learns from her friends, including Gabriel, that Arthur had pushed Amelia away after the first dance, mentioning some deal. She figures out what the deal could be and feels indebted to him for all the help he has been providing to her so far. She goes to thank him for helping her judo team and offers a calendar as a thank you gift. The calendar has all the important dates and events marked for the year, and she expresses her desire to celebrate all these events with him so he won't be lonely anymore. However, Arthur throws the calendar back in her hands and insults her for thinking ahead of herself. He reveals his motive to help her to be her poverty and his sympathy, and tells her to stay within her limits before walking away from there. He goes to a secluded place near mountains for some peace of mind, and tries to reason with himself that it was the right course of action. He tries to deny his feelings for the girl and thinks about Maria until Evie's sobs attract his attention from a nearby cliff. The fox spirit looks heartbroken to discover that her last hope to live with her first love has been shattered. Sniffing William's drama and lie, Arthur decides to help her and hires her as house help, which greatly disturbs William, but he looks helpless in the younger vampire's face. Meanwhile, Arthur himself pretends to never have known Irene in the college, leaving her distracted, and she accidentally drops her coin jar to the floor while placing books in her locker. The impact causes Mateo's coin to shine that is instantly sensed by the rogue vampire who reaches there, tracing the signals from his coin. However, Irene has already left with the coins by the time he arrives there. He patiently waits for her throughout the day and approaches her at night while she's returning from a day with Austin at the amusement park. Austin had dragged her there to cheer up upon finding her sad, so she pretended to enjoy her day while her friend cursed the rich man for hurting her. When she bumps into Mateo on her way back to home, the rogue vampire pretends to have known her, saying they're classmates, and offers to walk her home, saying he lives in the same area. Naive as always, Irene believes him, and they walk until he suddenly transforms into a monster in a deserted alley. Terrified, she tries to run away from him, but he catches her with his super speed and bites into her neck. Irene suddenly finds some flashbacks from the past in her mind, as if referring to her past life. Here, for the first time, we see Arthur's lover Maria's face, which is none other than Irene. Turns out that it's the young girl's rebirth, as she remembers dying at the hands of one such vampire in the past as well. However, Arthur soon arrives there upon sensing the rogue vampire's presence, and a battle ensues where he finally gets rid of Mateo once and for all. Irene witnesses this all with a blurry vision, as Arthur scrambles to help her up and admits to being a vampire when she watches his wounds heal on their own. She soon gets unconscious, and Arthur tries to read her mind. There, he finds their old memories, and finally realizes that she's Maria, as his transition to vampire self had somehow blurred the girl's face in his memories. When Irene wakes up, she finds herself in her bed, but the bite mark on her neck reminds her of the unbelievable reality she faced some hours ago. On the other hand, Arthur goes to William and finally admits his feelings for Irene while also telling him the rest of the matter. Next day, William visits Irene and tells her the truth about his identity being a vampire and also the person who turned Arthur into a vampire. A bit scared at first, she easily accepts him but looks skeptical about Arthur. William reveals that a mere bite from a vampire doesn't turn someone into their kind and that he had fed his blood to the younger boy to save his life. He also tells her that the flashbacks in her mind from Matteo's bite are actually from her past life and that she's Arthur's past lover whom he misses till date. However, Irene expresses her desire to stay away from the man for the time being because she finds it hard to accept Arthur as a vampire. She tries to probe Evie about it, asking her if she'd accept William even if he turns out to be some sort of a monster. Evie's response leaves her stunned as she readily accepts the idea, saying one accepts their beloved as a whole, with all their qualities and flaws included. Next day, Arthur appears at the judo club dressed in formal practice attire, much to everyone's surprise, but Irene and Austin look displeased about it. They ask him to leave, but the vampire cites activity club's rules to make them speechless and stay back. Irene confronts him later for chasing her now when he himself asked her to stay away from him. She warns him not to consider her Maria because she's Irene, her own person. Arthur admits that she's right, and confesses that although he saw Maria's memories in her mind, he fell for her before making the discovery. While confessing his love for her, he tells her about how he had decided to get frozen after his 224th birthday, but changed mind after meeting her because he now wishes to live with her. He further admits that he doesn't take her for Maria, but Irene herself, and proclaims to wait for her until she finds it in herself to accept him. Next day, he goes to give her an old keepsake, which she begrudgingly accepts and tries to shoo him away. But Irene's mother happens to pass by and gets happy to see him. She invites him in despite her daughter's silent protests, and even encourages him to not give up on her daughter upon finding him stealing glances at her daughter. The older lady accidentally spills some hot soup on his hand, and he acts like a true human, feeling pain and all. Irene has to apply ointment on his burn on her mother's instructions and confronts him in a low voice for acting in such a manner when he's a vampire. She leaves after Fiona and Austin arrive there, looking shocked to find him inside the house. Austin strictly tells him to leave right away, and Arthur expresses how he's aware of his feelings for Irene. Instead, he tells Austin to stay out of his way, saying he's just a friend in Irene's eyes. Angered, Austin challenges Arthur, saying he'll confess his love to Irene today, and prove that she also considers him more than just a friend. However, when he does confess his feelings to the girl, she finds it hard to believe. Irene tries to brush away the confession as a joke to distract her from heavy thoughts, thanking him and asking him to stop doing it because she's fine now. While Austin is practically heartbroken to learn that he may not stand a chance with Irene, Fiona comes out to cheer him up with a drink in her company. On the other hand, Irene plays the mini gong-like musical instrument that Arthur gave her, and its music brings back all the memories from her past life, hitting her with full force that she's Maria, Arthur's past lover. Overwhelmed with emotions, she immediately looks for Arthur and runs into his arms, admitting her love for him and sharing their first kiss in this life. They spend the entire night chatting away, and Irene tries to learn as much about him as possible. She teases him for getting the history questions right since he himself is 224 years old. While they're happy in their own bubble, William is hell-bent on making Evie run away by making her overwork herself. Poor girl has to take care of all the chores at home and watch him being lovey-dovey with some girl whom he calls his girlfriend. He makes her cook a fancy meal and knocks the dishes down by pretending to play a blindfold game with his girlfriend. Not just that, she even has to bear the scolding for not being careful enough with the dishes. Next day, Irene tells Austin that she's now dating Arthur, and the young man leaves in contempt without any response. He starts avoiding her everywhere until she talks things out with her at the bakery. Irene sets clear boundaries, telling him that she always considered him her best friend, but Arthur is the love of her life, and she can't live without either of them. Austin promises to come around this fact and tries to get back to being normal with her. On the other hand, Evie finally learns from William that he hates her body odor, and that's the reason he ran away from her many years ago. She cries her heart out in front of Irene and Fiona, and the latter suggests that she stop eating meat and turn vegan, saying that'll take care of her odor. As a fox, the decision is extremely hard for Evie, but she bites the bullet and decides to go for it. She not only improves her efficiency in household chores with the help of the internet, but also gives up meat, surviving on fruits and vegetables alone. Arthur gifts an Android phone to Irene and also announces their relationship to everyone at college, including their little judo club members, who all look quite happy for them. Austin announces to treat everyone to a meal in honor of their union, leaving both of them stunned. Arthur tries to learn about the 180-degree shift in his attitude from Irene, but she playfully calls it a secret. Later, Amelia brings a security guard in the class, asking everyone to give up their bags for inspection as someone seems to have stolen her expensive watch. As expected, the watch is found in Irene's bag, bringing her to the risk of getting expelled from the institute. While she and her friends try to think of a solution to the problem, Gabriel defends his ex-friend Amelia, telling everyone that she won't stoop so low as to frame Irene for theft. However, that does seem to be the case, as a psychopath-like classmate of theirs blackmails Amelia into befriending him by using her video of dropping her watch in Irene's bag while everyone else was out of the class. Amelia and Louis try to snatch his phone away from him, but instead, Louis gets hit square in the face and falls to the ground while he drags the girl inside the jungle. He is soon found by Gabriel and asks him to help rescue Amelia. The entire judo team comes to their aid as well, and they soon locate them thanks to Arthur's super senses. While Amelia is rescued, they all find the video in that boy's phone and are shocked at the extent of her hatred towards Irene. Amelia herself seems to be regretting her actions, crying and admitting to Gabriel that she was jealous and unable to comprehend why everyone likes her so much. Gabriel consoles her and gives her a piggyback ride back to her place. Meanwhile, William looks impressed with Evie's expertise but doesn't give up on making her leave. He plans a picnic with her, Arthur, and Irene, and keeps asking her to cook for them and do other chores in the extreme heat. He also prohibits Irene from helping her. Evie doesn't complain about anything despite feeling weak due to her vegan diet, and ends up falling unconscious while running to get some ice cream for William on his demand. Now her condition sends William into panic as he rushes to her side. The weakness brings out her tail unconsciously, and Irene discovers the truth about her identity as well. She angrily confronts William for treating Evie so poorly, while he already looks ashamed at his own actions. As a payback, he does his best to nurse Evie back to health. His dedication pays off as she finally recovers her health, but William looks a bit off about something, and leaves with little to no expressions on his face. On the other hand, Irene's team finally receives their schedule for the competition, and looks a bit sad to find themselves opposite the streak-winning team of the competition for the past years. However, they still decide to give it their best. Meanwhile, Arthur arranges a surprise romantic dinner date for William with Evie, and from the looks of it, the vampire looks smitten by the fox spirit's charm. They dine, dance, and go on a romantic walk, while holding hands much to Evie's pleasure. On the other hand, Irene's team practices for their match at the beach side, where Austin accidentally discovers Arthur's identity as a non-human when he stops a speeding car accident with his bare hands. The amount of pressure on his hands makes him bleed the blood in blue color, while his eyes also turn blue, which gives him away. Austin steals his hair sample from his coat and tries to get a friend of his to look into what possible species Arthur can be, but he's shocked to discover that the hair sample from his pocket has long disappeared, probably with Arthur's interference himself. He scrambles to run to Irene and tells her about his discovery. She tries to make him believe that he's being delusional, but Austin firmly expresses his plan to uncover the truth. Till then, he warns her to stay away from the man. Worried, Irene talks to Arthur about the matter and tells him to be careful as she's aware of Austin's stubborn nature when he decides to do something. True to her words, Austin plans to run over Arthur with a truck while holding Irene as a witness to the vampire holding the speeding truck with his bare hands. However, unlike his expectations, Arthur keeps standing firm in the face of danger, making Austin nervous as he flips the truck's direction in the last moments to avoid the collision. As a result, the truck almost tumbles down the mountainous path, if not for Arthur jumping to hold it back and save Austin. However, instead of feeling thankful, the guy rushes to Irene's side, telling her to take note of the blue blood on Arthur's hand, proving his point that he's a dangerous non-human, probably a vampire. He tells Irene to stay away from him, lest he harms her in any way, but Irene admits to being aware of the facts from the start. She also tells him that she knew about Arthur's identity way before getting into a relationship with him, leaving Austin baffled, and he leaves angrily without saying anything anymore. His attitude leaves Irene worried, and she shares her concerns with Arthur about how he risked his own life just to bring Arthur's real identity. She worries that things may not stay cordial between them, now that he has learned that she kept a secret from him. But Arthur consoles her, promising his support in all situations. Next day, Irene's opponent team in the competition comes to pick a fight with her team in the college. The team head bullies their members and injures Gabriel, who comes forward to protect his team until Arthur steps out and teaches him a lesson. They leave with a challenge to Irene that she'll face the worst defeat of her life in the competition. On Evie's end, she plans to propose to William for marriage and shares her plans with his pet hamster Babbitt. She makes an excuse of cleaning Babbitt's cage when the vampire catches her around his hamster. Later, she offers him a drink with the proposal ring in the glass, but William offers her to drink with him much to her delight. He sends her to fetch another glass and keeps waiting for her to come back. After some time, he goes to check on the girl but finds her standing there dazed with Babbitt's empty cage. The scene suggests that she ate up Babbitt, and William furiously asks her to leave his home, regretting ever believing that a fox spirit can give up on meat. Evie's pleadings fall on deaf ears as she keeps repeating that she didn't harm Babbitt. At night, Arthur and Irene plan to watch the lunar eclipse, but Irene ends up falling asleep with her head on her beloved's shoulder. Arthur just keeps sitting amused until he watches the moon turn red, giving him an eerily dangerous realization that Theodore is going to receive more powers, and thus becoming more powerful than Arthur and William combined. On the day of the competition, the new couple learns that Austin hasn't been to the judo club since the incident where he discovered Arthur's identity, so Arthur goes to meet him. Austin still looks more concerned with Irene's safety rather than his own life, as he bravely warns him from harming his friend. Arthur patiently tries to explain that he's no different from him, except for some supernatural powers. He reminisces how he too was a normal human with some dreams and aspirations until that fateful night, and urges Austin to prove his loyalty to his friend in today's competition. On the other hand, their judo team almost gives up on the idea that Austin would join them, but he arrives at the last moment, pushing everything behind in the past. Even Amelia and Louis join them in the competition hall to support their team, making everyone delighted and believe that everything is finally settled now. During the match, both teams keep winning alternatively, scoring equal points until they're left with 3 final matches. In the first match, Gabriel wins against his opponent while Austin loses in the second match, leaving Irene no other choice but to aspire to win the third match at any cost. Her opponent looks quite powerful and even manages to deal some blows, but Irene eventually outshines her, finally winning the match and the championship as well. They all gather at Irene's home to celebrate the victory, where the group learns another shocking revelation that Amelia and Gabriel have been engaged with each other since childhood. However, Louis looks a bit upset at the revelation as he believes that he's a better match for the girl. The group is soon joined by William, who feels lonely without Evie at home, and the celebration continues. Unbeknownst to them, Theodore has already returned to the lands and has started killings left and right. On the other hand, William keeps missing Evie's presence in his home. Even his so-called girlfriend fails to cheer him up. What's worse, he finds Babbitt sneaking around the house and realizes that it must have escaped the cage, and he misunderstood the poor girl. It's revealed that Evie is living with Irene and looks quite impatient to return to her love side, but Irene and Arthur strictly tell her to practice patience to teach the older vampire a lesson and realize her importance. However, she starts taking care of his stuff from behind the curtain, but William soon realizes her presence and manages to coax her out in front of him. Later, the fox spirit happily discusses her future plans with Irene about how they have quite a few hundred years to live together. Her statement makes Irene realize the volatility of her own life as a human and how she doesn't have an eternity to accompany the love of her life. She requests Arthur to turn her into a vampire like himself, but he strongly opposes the idea. The vampire urges her to live a normal, carefree human life with her friends and family instead of getting entangled in the messy life of a vampire. Although he manages to convince her for the time being, Arthur himself looks quite depressed regarding the future of their relationship. However, he still refuses to convert the girl despite William approving of Irene's suggestion. Instead, he starts talking about the recent lunar and solar eclipses, and William reveals how these phenomena must have empowered Theodore enough to come after him. His past memories reveal that William found Theodore in an injured condition many years ago. Back then, young Theodore used to commit theft to support his sister's treatment, and during one such heist, he got severely beaten and reached the brink of death. At that time, he requested the passerby William to send his stolen goods to his sister, but the vampire took pity on him and converted him to a vampire moments before his death. Theodore looked happy to have the chance to live longer and followed William obediently, until one day he discovered that the rich people he used to steal from killed his sister. Filled with vengeance, he turned rogue and swore to wipe out the entire village that his enemies hailed from. The oath led to the night when he attacked Arthur's village and single-handedly killed everyone. His last victim was Arthur, but William had intercepted him, telling him to come back to his senses, but the raging vampire kept talking about wanting revenge and asking him to let him go. William had no other choice but to freeze him away in an ice cage, but with the recent eclipses, the vampire seems to have gotten free from the cage. William laments on how the rogue vampire would want to end both of them now, as Arthur was his last victim before William spoiled his plans. It doesn't take long for them to wait until Theodore finally appears inside their house and lure them out into the jungle. There, William finds the dead body of his human girlfriend whom Theodore thought to be his lover, and thus ended her life. The older vampire feels the guilt weigh on him for causing the loss of an innocent soul. A battle finally ensues, and William and Arthur's combined efforts still fail to defeat Theodore while he disappears after making them agitated. It's as if he just came to announce his comeback for now. Back at home, William asks Arthur to leave him as he now has people to protect like Irene and his friends. However, Arthur strictly tells him that he's his family, and as much important as Irene is for him, so he refuses to distance himself from William to avoid Theodore's wrath. With Theodore on his trail, William decides to fire Evie as well, and covers it up with the reason that he's disgusted by her. He's too scared to lose her to death if Theodore learns about his involvement with Evie, so he ignores all her pleas to let her stay by his side. Arthur, too, breaks his ties with Irene under the excuse that he just wanted to spend some time with a girl with human feelings. Now that she's started taking their relationship too seriously, and even wishes to live an eternity with him, he can't handle it. Irene finds it hard to believe, but still tells him that she won't mention turning into a vampire in the future. But Arthur pretends to have grown bored of her and leaves. Irene looks extremely heartbroken and leaves for home with her bike. On her way out of the institute, she hears someone call her name, but whatever she witnesses turns out to be really scary, as she rushes to Arthur's home asking him to save her. However, she manages to distract him from his concerns for the time being, and suddenly attacks him with a knife. Fortunately, Arthur and William are quick enough to dodge the attack and hold her hands as she shouts at them, telling them to let go. Turns out that Theodore used his special abilities to control her mind and used her as a weapon to inflict a more painful death on Arthur. The two vampires tie her up and lock her in a room, and William reveals that the knife she's holding is made of a rare metal that can easily kill the most powerful of vampires. Arthur blames himself for her poor condition and goes to check on her, where she innocently asks him to untie her hands. However, a look inside her mind reveals it to be blank, which suggests that she's being controlled by Theodore. Theodore starts inducing self-inflicted injuries on her arms that greatly pain Arthur, and he hugs her, begging her to listen to him with what little part of her consciousness can listen, but Irene finds it hard to control her mind and body. It takes a lot of time and promises to save her on Arthur's part, to calm her down for the time being, as he tells her not to let the vampire control herself in the meantime. He then goes to meet Austin and tells him about the overall situation, requesting him to take care of Irene should he never come back. Austin promises to take care of Irene, but also makes him promise to return safely, marking an era of friendship between them. Austin goes with him to check on Irene and tries to communicate with her, but the girl suddenly starts screaming hysterically. Arthur has to intervene and calm her down. He reminds her of their unusual interactions in this life, and how she was the first person to slap him in the past 200 years. He also promises to spend every upcoming event with her just the way she suggested in the calendar that she gave him. On the other hand, Theodore is seen visiting his sister's grave and repeating his promise to avenge her unfair death. For William, he's approached by a well-dressed Evie, who tells him to fulfill his promise of having a drink together that was postponed when Babbitt went missing. The pair goes to a wine cellar playing the game of finding the oldest wine there, and ends up getting too drunk in their bid to taste a sip from every bottle to find it. Finally, William wins the game, but Evie seems to be wishing for the night to never end. They leave the bar together, and perhaps emboldened by the liquor in his system, William grows closer to the girl and holds her hand firmly as they walk away side by side. Next day, William and Arthur head to the place where Theodore called them for a final battle and leave Austin in charge of Irene's security. Soon after they leave, she regains her consciousness and asks Austin to untie her hands, saying they hurt. Austin initially doesn't trust her, but she answers all his questions that only Irene is supposed to know. As a result, he sets her free, but she immediately knocks him unconscious before running away. Meanwhile, Arthur and William find it hard to overpower Theodore even with their combined powers. The evil vampire has gained some superpowers that are enough to knock both of them out. He bites Arthur on his hand during the fight, causing a strange chemical to be injected in his body, rendering him weak. This leaves William alone to fight him and even more vulnerable, but he soon gets back up from Evie, who attacks Theodore from the back. However, she's no match for Theodore and receives severe injuries. She fails to stand up as her spine gets broken with the impact and eventually dies in William's arms, who confesses his love to her, asking her to stay back for him. Evie's death proves to be William's breaking point, and he turns back to attack Theodore with full force. Before he could grow weak in the face of his power again, Irene also arrives there with the knife that Theodore gave her to finish off Arthur. She attacks Arthur with it, but stops inches away from inserting the knife in his body. Arthur seems to have given up on his life watching her act like this, but William drags him away nonetheless. On the other hand, Theodore looks confused as to why she stopped mid-attack when her mind is under his control. He goes to Irene and instructs her to kill Arthur and William, but she suddenly inserts the knife right where his heart lies, giving him less to no chance of realizing what just happened. The girl tells him that she'd never be too influenced to kill her own love. The attack finishes off the vampire, but not before he attacks her with all the remaining force in his body. The impact proves to be quite lethal, and she reaches the brink of death in a few moments. However, Arthur doesn't look ready to turn her into a vampire, as he doesn't wish for her to go through the same agony of having to live for centuries and give up her human side, so he simply hugs her, crying his eyes out, seemingly having accepted that she's going to die soon. Few months later, William adopts a fox in Evie's memory, and Irene looks completely healthy as she approaches her vampire boyfriend in the college. Turns out, he had given up on his insistence and finally turned her into a vampire. As Arthur and Irene walk away with hands in hands, a strange dark pattern appears on the back of his hand, similar to what Matteo and Theodore had. He turns to look behind with a smirk while his eyes change color to red instead of blue. The series comes to a happy end here with a bit of suspense there about what Theodore's injected chemicals did to Arthur's body and brain.